Hello everyone. In this lecture we are going to be covering the different government and economic systems that exist in the world today. We'll start with the types of governments that we are going to talk about, and those include autocracy, monarchy, oligarchy, theocracy, and of course democracy. So an autocracy is a system of government where there is only one person with unlimited power and authority. And this is the oldest and also the most common form of government in the world today. Autocrats, which is what we call the leader, maintain their power through inheritance, so they're born into power, or they might use military or police power in order to obtain and keep their power. So here are some examples of autocrats, and this is Saddam Hussein from Iraq, Fidel Castro from Cuba, and Kim Jong-un from North Korea. They are all dictators. Those are forms of autocrats, and they're modern examples of autocrats. All right. Next, we're going to talk about monarchies. And that's a form of autocracy with a hereditary king or queen, and they have supreme power. Absolute monarchies are rare today. They don't exist. That is actually from very old times. And today, even though there are some kings and queens, there are monarchies in the world, they're usually constitutional monarchies. And that means that the monarch shares their power with a governing body like a parliament or a prime minister, and or they might serve as just a ceremonial leader. They don't really have any political power, but they're the face of the country, okay? And it's based on tradition. Here's an example of a monarch from the Middle East, and here you have Queen Elizabeth from the United Kingdom. And she is a prime example of someone who does not have complete authority over her country. She actually has very little political power. She is more of a ceremonial figure. Right here we have the king and queen of Spain. And here are the emperor and his wife, and they are from Japan. Here's another royal family, and that goes to show you that not all royals wear crowns and capes and long fancy dresses full of jewels. And here is, I believe they're from Malaysia. And now we can talk about oligarchies. An oligarchy stands for rule of a few, and that is a system of government in which there are a very small group of people hold power, and it derives its power from wealth, military power, or social position. So the people who are in power are either very rich, they have the backing of the military, or they have a social status that gives them power. Today, governments in communist countries are oligarchies. So, for example, China. These are the leaders who make the decisions in China. Here's another oligarchy. In Russia as well. So this is Putin. Now let's talk about a theocracy. Theocracy is a system of government in which the people who rule are regarded as divinely inspired. That means that they have received the authority from God to rule. And government officials are thought to receive their inspiration, their guidance, and the authority to rule from a higher power, right? Theocracies still exist in many parts of North Africa and Southwest Asia. A lot of theocracies today are Muslim. So here's the ruler of Iran, and that is a theocracy. The Pope is a good example of a theocracy. This is a Christian theocracy because the Pope the Vatican is its own little land. It doesn't belong to any country, and so the head of the Vatican is the Pope, and he is thought to be divinely inspired, right? Inspired by God. So that is a good example of a theocracy that exists today. All right, and finally we have a democracy, and that is a system of government in which the leaders rule and only rule because people allow them to, right? They rule with the consent of citizens, and because we put them in power through our vote. In a direct democracy, people vote for every single law that is being passed. Those don't exist at national levels anymore, but you might find them at local levels, like at cities or counties, where people will vote directly for every single law that is passed. Those don't exist, again, like I said, at the national levels. Instead, many democratic countries will have republics, and in republics, voters are electing representatives, and those representatives make the rules about which laws are passed or how they're implemented. All right, so that's the difference between a direct democracy and a republican democracy, which is more like what we have at the national level in the United States. Okay, so I put a picture here of our current president and some of his advisors. This is participation in the democratic system of government. Okay. All right, so now let's talk about economic systems, and we'll start with the traditional economy. A traditional economy is a system in which custom is what controls the economic activity. So these only exist in very few parts of the world today, and they are going to be in rural countries, third world countries, where the economy is heavily focused on agriculture. Because that is a tradition that is passed down from one family to another, or one generation to another. Okay. Then we have the market economy. And the market economy is an economic system that is based on the idea of free enterprise. And so to give you the definition of free enterprise, that is when people have the right to own property, and then they also have the right to make a profit, and the government does not interfere or interferes very little. And in a free enterprise, in a market economy, the prices and the things that are made are determined by supply and demand. So to give you an example, when the iPhone 6 came out, the price of the iPhone 5 went down. That is because the iPhone 5 was no longer in as much demand as the iPhone 6. So it didn't mean that the iPhone 5 was no good. It just meant that there was less people wanting it, so the price goes down. Now, the price of the iPhone 6 was really, really high because people really wanted it, and so the demand sets a higher price. They're willing to pay a higher price for it, and that is how a market economy works. Okay. In a mixed economy, you have a system of resource management in which the government supports, but it also regulates enterprise through decisions that affect the marketplace. And they do this because they need to protect the consumers, and they also need to protect the workers. So mixed economy is much more common in this time period, and a great example of it is the United States. While the United States allows for the private ownership of businesses, they do regulate those businesses to make sure that no other laws are being violated or other people's rights are not being violated. And they do this in the best interest of the economy as well. So a command economy is a system where the resource management is completely controlled by the government. So all the decisions about the things that are produced, what can be sold, what can be made, and what prices are going to be set, and how much people are going to make, the government makes all of those decisions. The government also owns and controls land, labor, capital, and business managers, right? So there's no private ownership in a command economy. And they distribute the goods and services equally among citizens. At least that's the idea behind the command economy, but it doesn't always happen. A lot of factors play in, like greed, and so people don't always get their fair share in command economies. But these are existing today in communist countries. Lastly, we're going to talk about the economic development of countries. So when you have a more developed country, that is a country that has highly developed economy, and it also has advanced technological infrastructure. That means that it manufactures a lot of products. It has factories, they make a lot of things, they come up with new ideas. And so a good example of this would be China, Japan, the United States, right? Newly industrialized countries are countries that are barely beginning to transition from being an agricultural economy to manufacturing and industrial activity. And Mexico would be a good example of a newly industrialized country. And finally, we have the less developed country. And that is a country that has the lowest indicators of social economic development. So in the less developed country, there is not a good educational system. There is not a focus on manufacturing. They're actually more focused on agriculture and growing raw materials that are sent to newly industrialized or more developed countries to be made into goods. So they are less fortunate in this aspect. Okay, and I think that concludes our lecture on government and economies. We did do a foldable activity with this where you wrote down your notes, but if you need help with that foldable, let me know. I'd be happy to help you. And if you have any questions, write them down and come see me as soon as possible. Thanks for watching.